Alright, so now that we've done all of our prep work and our base coat work, now we're left with a piece of silver material with the desired finish, be it smooth or something else. And now we're going to work on... So now that we've gone through all of the prep work and all of the base coat work, now we're going to be working on our finished paint job. So that's going to involve turning this into something like this. Right, so the process that we're going to use to do this is a whole bunch of different versions of masking. Masking basically is applying material to your whatever it is that you're painting so that when you paint, that area doesn't get painted. For my technique for the weathering that I've been taking you guys through, I use various different materials for masking. The first is masking tape. Now that's the easiest. For large sections that we're not going to want painted, masking tape is going to allow us to block those out so that we can paint right over it. I also use coffee. Now coffee grounds, I'll get into that technique in just a little bit, but coffee grounds are going to create the sort of pitted scars like this, or using a different technique with coffee, it can create those little speckles that you see there. Okay, the holes are weathering in the material like this one right there. All right, so I use coffee, and I also use either toothpaste or mustard. Now, really any sort of gel-like material that repels paint will work. One of these two, I used toothpaste, and the other one I used mustard, but that is what's making these marks right here that are the chips in the final paint. All right, so the masking tape, coffee, toothpaste, and or mustard. All right, so the first step in masking is going to be the wide strokes. So what we do is we go through and we find anywhere that we're going to want to have the color over once everything is said and done. All right, anywhere that we're going to have exposed metal, we're going to mask, or we're going to leave that area, and we're going to mask out the areas where the color happens. The reason for this is we want to make it so that when you chip through the paint in the final paint job, you find that brilliant silver underneath. The exposed is more open to the elements and is going to have a sort of rougher metallic tone. So go through, and anywhere that you're going to have your final color, mask that off with masking tape. Now this takes a while to do, and you're going to have to tear tape into tiny little pieces to get all of the angles, but do your due diligence and get it on there and get it flattened down, and once you have it there, you should end up with something that looks a lot like this. All right, now we're going to go through with our coffee weathering. All right, so in order to use coffee, I just used a coffee pod. You want the coffee to be damp, otherwise it's not going to stick. It's just going to roll off your material if it's dry. Okay, usually I have a paper towel, like a damp paper towel there. So I take some damp coffee, I apply it where I want it to be, I tap it on there with the damp paper towel. Okay, if you apply the coffee and you paint while the coffee is still wet, it will expose down to your base layer. If you allow the coffee to dry, then the paint that you put on top of it will soak in, and you'll end up with this sort of rougher damage. So you can use either or a combination of both. But you get the coffee where you want it, and let it dry for at least a little bit, because if there's still drips of water rolling off of it, then those are going to repel the paint too. So if you want it damp so that it comes off down to the finish, then wait for a little bit until it's damp. If you want it entirely dry, give it a day or so. And then what I did was I came in with the Hammertone. Okay, now for these I used Hammertone Antique Silver. And I painted, basically it masked out this area right here. So this area stayed silver. This area got the weather, or the Hammertone on top of it. Once your Hammertone dries, any of those areas where you had your coffee, you can come in with a paper towel and just sort of rub it away, and it'll come off. Okay, then you unmask, and you're ending up with a double silver tone that looks a lot like this. Now that we've got all of our metallic tones, now we're going to come back in with the paint. So we have to use the masking tape and mask again. Right? This time we're masking the opposite side, so make certain that your Hammertone is dry or else you're going to mess it up with the masking tape. But you mask the opposite side so that you're protecting all of that Hammertone, and now we're going in for these red sections. Once we have it all masked out, now's the time for the mustard and or the toothpaste. Right, I just use a paintbrush to apply it. There's a little bit of artistry in this, but anywhere that you're going to want these scuff marks, I generally try to go for corners or edges, and then on straight areas or flat areas rather, I look for, if I was wearing this on my shoulder and I took a tumble, these are some areas where it might end up with a dent. All right, so apply the toothpaste or the mustard to these areas. Now, if you're using mustard, I suggest that you let it dry. If you're using toothpaste, it's not going to dry, so you don't have to worry about that. But having applied your toothpaste or your mustard masking, go in with your solid color paint and just paint over it. Okay, the masking tape is going to protect all of your metal areas. The toothpaste or the mustard is going to repel for the scratches. Get your colored paint on there. It'll end up looking a lot like this. And then you just go in with a wet paper towel. Okay, if it's the mustard that you used, use a really wet paper towel because the moisture is going to get in, wet down the mustard, and that's going to allow it to come off. If it's the toothpaste that you used, you just need a damp paper towel. Actually, a dry one would do, but then you want to come back over with a damp one later. Otherwise, you're going to end up with toothpaste all over everything. But you basically come in with a damp paper towel and you wipe it away, scrub into these spots, and it'll come off, and you end up with these scores that look like this. All right, so now once we have it to this step, okay, we got a lot of our damage in here. We got all of our colors. Now we're going to need to come back in with some final weathering that's going to sort of unify all of this, cut down on this glossy sheen that you can see reflecting the light, and turn our material, or finished product rather, turn it from this into something more like this. All right, we'll cover that next time.